For the podcast and more details, visit www.freeamerican.com or catch the podcast by phone by calling 832-999-8621. With your soulmate on the darkness of divine eternity, like many thieves who plunder in the shadows of the night, they break inside and enter through the windows of your mind. How can
All right, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of the Free American Hour. I'm your host. I am Clay Douglas. Hello, my guest today is Eric Pratt of Gun Owners of America. Hello, Eric. How are you?
Doing real well. Clay, how are you?
Well, I'm doing pretty well for an old guy, yeah. I've interviewed your father many times over the last 20 years, but it's a pleasure to have you on. I'm glad to see you following in your father's footsteps.
Well, thank you. Yeah, me too.
He's done a wonderful work, and let me go back and ask. I don't think I've talked to anybody from gun owners since the whole Sandy Hook thing. And what's going on now? I even hear that Harry Reid has said that they don't have enough votes for any kind of gun control. But we just had another what I would consider a false flag incident at the Navy Yard. Now, all of these soldiers that were there in the Navy Yard had guns, but nobody had any ammo. What's the deal? What's happening here?
It's simply tragic, and it's not surprising that we keep seeing over and over again that all these tragedies occur in places where people are defenseless, and defenseless by law. You know, much has usually been made about the fact that these people are crazy and have mental issues, and yet I will tell you, they make very rational decisions about the fact that they don't go shoot up. Typically, they won't go shoot up places like, let's say, a police station where there's lots of guns, or a gun show or a gun store. In other words, they go to places where by law they're going to be either the only one with a gun, or there'll be few and far people between with a gun. I mean, obviously there were MPs, but he had the element of surprise, so he takes out one of the MPs, takes one of their firearms, and off he goes. And sadly, we keep seeing over and over that in these gun-free zones, even though you may be talking about military guys, a lot of them are outraged that they have to be left defenseless. I saw an interview from right after the Fort Hood shooting. And it was very interesting. Same thing. Fort Hood happened on a gun-free zone. That tragedy there. And one of the wives was asked later, was she anxious about her husband being deployed to Afghanistan? He was a soldier there at Fort Hood, and her response was, "Well, at least he'll be able to defend himself and shoot back." Yeah, it's an incredible thing that being shipped off to Afghanistan means that you're going to be safer at work than you would be on a military base here at home.
That's pretty insane. Obviously, the gun-free zones aren't what the communists hyped. You're younger than me and Larry, so let me ask you from your standpoint. Your father and I came up through the 50s when we were having a Cold War. We were fighting communists. We were opposing communism around the world. I volunteered to Vietnam to go fight the communists. And then I happened to read the Communist Manifesto, and it dawned on me that every plank on the Communist Manifesto was intact in America today. Who actually won the Cold War? I mean, really, I mean, did the communists win the Cold War, and so we got one world government in the UN, and of course the UN. What's going on with the UN attempt to disarm us? What's the status on that? Wasn't that a treaty or something we were supposed to sign?
Well, to my knowledge, the president has not signed the treaty, although he has promised to do so. And so we have a situation where the United Nations has finalized the treaty, and at some point, well, actually, the president's spokesman Jay Carney said that they would be signing the treaty at some point after August. So we're now in that uh, point in time, and of course, this is a very concerning treaty. Um, I think the big picture with the treaty is that it's going to impose handgun and semi-auto bans, gun registration, and microstamping. So this has a lot of features to it that are just very repugnant to the Constitution. And probably the biggest concern is that even if the Senate doesn't go along and doesn't ratify the treaty, and I don't think they will, not with the current Senate that we have, that nevertheless the president will sign the treaty and then start implementing aspects of the treaty through executive orders and executive actions, which is exactly the type of thing that he's doing already now that he can't get his gun control agenda passed through the Senate.
What is your call on Obama? I mean, I pointed out that there's not a dime's worth of difference between between the Republicans and the Democrats right now. I don't know if you agree with that, but we've had somebody that's my career spans now pissing off four presidents or five, but I don't see any difference between Bush and Clinton and Bush and Obama.
Well, if there's whatever difference there is one of degree. I mean, most Republicans are just Democrat light, and this was the problem that now, mind you, that there are some who are strong constitutionalists and will not budge on constitutional principles. People like Ted Cruz of Texas and Rand Paul of Kentucky. Certainly two notable senators that come to my mind, Mike Lee of Utah. But one of the big fights that we were facing in the recent gun control debate earlier this year, when the president and the media were trying to use the opportunity of a very tragic situation in Sandy Hook up there in Connecticut, was to use this to turn it into a gun control referendum. And they were trying to say that the American people now want gun control. The tide is turning, so they were trying to ram gun control through. And our biggest battle was keeping Republicans from joining the Democrats. Now, if there is a noticeable or notable difference, is that the constituents of the Republicans are very loud, very boisterous, and Republican elected officials realize that unless they really want to sacrifice their base, they're eventually going to have to stay in line with them. And so, one of the things that we really focused on were certain key Republicans like Tom Coburn of Oklahoma, who was trying to work out a compromise, and we were ruthless in the state of Oklahoma, and everywhere Coburn went, he was running into people, prompted by our letters and email alerts that we were issuing, and people knew what Coburn was up to, and that backed him down, and it backed other Republicans down. In fact, the New York Times and other newspapers pointed out that one of the frustrations Democrats were having is that they couldn't get Republicans to come on board and join with them in supporting gun control, and the reason given was GOA members. So, I do think we have a stronger pull with them, but obviously their instincts are always to just to go with the flow. They get into that country club up there on Capitol Hill, and they want the people in the media to like them, and so that's part of our job as gun owners is that we put the heat on them, And we remind them, look, if you do this, it's going to be mighty hard come election day. You're going to be finding yourself looking for another job. And that's the reason we were able to keep the overwhelming majority of Republicans in the Senate on our side back in April, and why we were able to defeat gun control, which was actually the Senate was our weakest chamber, and yet we were able to defeat it there. That's because of the power of the grassroots.
We saw a little bit of power of grassroots that's kind of close to my heart. You are in Washington, aren't you, or nearby?
Right outside of Washington, yes, sir.
What happened this last weekend? We had supposedly had a million Muslim march and a million bikers showed up instead. I just wonder what the atmosphere was. I've been there many times for Rolling Thunder with Artie Mueller, and we get quite a few bikers there. They might have had more in Washington this last weekend than we did for Rolling Thunder. What was the
Right.
reaction? What was the reaction on the to that many Americans showing up? And now we're supposed to have something like that happen again. This time, truckers want to roll into Washington and shut the whole government down for 3 days in
What,
October.
it was very impressive. One of the gathering spots was near my office, and there was a whole bunch of bikes, and it was impressive. I mean, as they rode into D.C., I heard reports that Virginia State Police had blocked off um, roadways to allow them to pass, and that the Virginia State Police were saluting them as they went into the district. And so, I think some aspects of this was very touching. I think it's funny on the other side that the million Muslim march turned out to be a 200 march. So not many of them showed up, whereas with the bikers there was about 1.2 million. So it was very well attended indeed.
Well, my opinion, they just didn't go far enough. I think they should have rolled right into the Capitol and arrested some of these people. I mean, isn't treason still against the law, Eric?
Yes, it is.
And what is if anybody voted for to suspend your right to bear arms, suspend your Second Amendment, I'd say that that constitutes treason. But maybe that's why they say I'm a radical, huh? What about the attacks on our veterans? Now, I want to go back and get some history. Last time Larry was on my show, last time your dad was on my show, we talked about this whole gun running operation, BATF, running guns over to, I guess maybe that's just their Confederates, the drug cartels, or is that CIA or Mossad?
Yeah, basically the update on Fast and Furious is that there's no update, which is pretty sad. Yeah, here we have the biggest illegal gun running operation probably in our history, where our government, an anti-gun administration, was helping guns to be put into the hands of illegal buyers who should not have been approved at gun stores, and yet they were giving them the green light falsely, so that these guns could then be supposedly traced back to the Mexican drug cartel. And of course, they had no way of tracing it. They stopped tracking them as soon as the guns crossed the border. Heck, our authorities weren't even working with the Mexican authorities. They didn't even know we were doing this. So it was a whole crock that this was all about tracing the guns back up to up the chain in the Mexican drug cartels. Actually, whistleblowers within the ATF have indicated what was actually at play was providing statistics and generating statistics of dead bodies being killed by these guns, so that the administration could argue for more gun control legislation. I mean, very cynical indeed what the administration was doing. Of course, the Attorney General was held in contempt by the House of Representatives. In fact, many Democrats crossed over party lines to vote for the contempt citation. And really nothing has been done since then. Holder was held in contempt because he has yet to present and many of the documents that he's been requested to share with the investigating committee in the House. And so as a result, he was held in contempt of the House of Representatives for that. And so right now, technically, it is in court, although my understanding is that there's still some wrangling back and forth between the administration and the House committee in terms of releasing more documents. I mean, this is at least what we're getting on the public consumption end. We'd like to see, of course, this actually tried and see the Attorney General Holder have to start defending himself in court for this contempt citation.
This is one of the things that really bothers me is the lack of enforcement. I mean, Eric Holder's thumbed his nose at Congress. Obama thumbed his nose at Congress. The banksters, by the way, the Federal Reserve charter is supposed to be up this year, but nobody's mentioned anything about that. And why can't we get some of these prosecutors? Why can't we get some prosecutor here to take on these bankers? I mean, they've ripped us off for trillions. And Iceland, you never hear anything about Iceland in mainstream media, or even on the internet for that much, because they arrested the bankers and bailed out the people. And people have pointed out if they had done that with that $2 trillion, if they'd given that $2 trillion to the people instead of the bankers, the people could have turned around and given it to the bankers and paid off their mortgages instead of losing a million homes. Why can't we get any law enforcement? Why isn't the FBI looking at this? I mean, did the investigating the criminals end with the assassination of Bobby Kennedy?
Yeah, well, when you talk about enforcement of the law, I mean, obviously Obama has been a liberal dream. I mean, the administration selectively enforces the laws that it wants. I mean, just look at Obamacare. It's issued all kinds of waivers to companies that are contributors to the Democrat Party. It's over 1,000 waivers. It's really embarrassed that the law is about to go into effect, and is trying in many ways to. In fact, even the IRS chief recently said that he prefers his own health care to Obamacare. You see mass resistance, and it's not only in that, but in many other areas. Selective enforcement. The raid on Gibson Guitar for supposedly using banned wood for their guitars, and yet a competitor, which was using the same kind of wood, was left untouched. Well, lo and behold, it turns out Gibson Guitar, the owners there are Republican contributors, whereas their competitors were contributors to the Democrat Party. And so you get this picture, this nepotistic favoritism picture with this administration, and so it's not surprising that he's covered for Holder. Heck, I mean this scheme was hatched. We don't know how far near the top it goes, but we think it was relatively high near the top because all through it with Fast and Furious, Attorney General Holder's been caught in several lies, like saying, oh yeah, the first I heard about Fast and Furious was in the news just a few weeks ago, and then lo and behold, turned out that he had memos that had been given to him going back the previous year. And so, either this is the most inept Attorney General who doesn't read his memos and doesn't know what's going on around him or underneath him, or we have a lying, scheming Attorney General that is just simply not being upfront, and of course the president is not going to do anything to hold him accountable.
Maybe we need somebody to translate the law into Ebonics or something so Holder can understand it. sorry, sorry about that. I couldn't resist. The now, I've told people anytime a communist regime takes over, they go after three classes of people in order. They go after the farmers first because they don't want you being able to feed yourself, and then they go after the intelligence next. Anyone that's smart enough to know what they're doing and what
PTSD and other maladies resulting, coming back from war, so they suffer with, from flashbacks, the shakes at night, loss of sleep, things like that. And so, as a result, the Veterans Administration started taking those names under the Clinton administration and submitting them to the FBI. And so now we see that 150,000 military veterans have been denied their Second Amendment rights as a result of this. Now, the thing that's very concerning is that what has happened to military veterans in the hundreds of thousands is going to happen to average citizens in the millions under Obamacare. And, there's a lot of reasons for Americans to hate Obamacare. I mean, the law is projected to raise health care costs on millions of Americans. Congress is trying to exempt themselves from under it. As mentioned earlier, the president's trying to delay huge parts of it. But gun owners should be especially concerned about Obamacare because it will allow the federal government, just as it's been done to the military veterans, to use our medical information to keep us from buying guns. Think about, has there been a death in your family and you suffer from PTSD, or do you take anxiety meds, or have you ever said, I thought of suicide when I was dealing with stress at home or at work or because of a breakup I was going through? Or if have you ever voluntarily checked yourself into an institution to get counseling? If you answer yes to any of those questions, then you might find yourself disarmed in the near future under Obamacare, as when it goes online and doctors and psychologists start submitting medical information into the medical database. Now the FBI will be able to have access to that. And what they use is the term those who have been adjudicated as mental defective. Of course, we know that this has nothing to do with judicial adjudications because these are people that have been simply diagnosed perhaps by a doctor or a psychologist. And so it's a huge stretching of what the law says. I mean, basically, the whole concept of being adjudicated as a mental defective was to grab those people and keep them from owning firearms if they had committed a murder, but by reason of insanity, they were adjudicated as mental defective. So that's what's in the law. But now they've tried to take that term, and you see that even with the recent shooting. They try to make it all about, mental illness, and we need to keep people who are mentally ill. The problem is who really is mentally ill, and they stretch that term. Heck, when the CDC says that almost 50% of Americans will, in their lifetime, develop a mental illness, you see what's happening here is they're stretching that term to cover, use a dragnet to grab almost half the population. And so, in other words, it's just yet one other way to keep people from buying guns. If they can't actually buy the guns, if they can't actually ban the guns, then they'll try a different way, which is to make the person a prohibited purchaser.
now. What about this recent purchases by the Department of Homeland Security of these billion rounds of hollow point ammo that aren't supposed to be allowed in warfare? Uh, what is and I the whole shooting at the Navy Yard? We had people, soldiers there that said we couldn't get ammo. Where's all this ammo? What's going on with that?
Well, yeah, that's an interesting question. I mean, certainly the huge ammo purchases have been done by Homeland Security. And of course, that is a different department than where you would find the Navy. Uh, you know, sadly, servicemen again, they're just simply denied by law. So even though they may have the ammunition, they're not allowed to carry a weapon when they're on the base. You know, as far as Homeland Security, that's something that I think that Congress is still looking into. They had hearings on this. The agency, the administration, did indeed order a whopping record-breaking number of ammo. They claim it's for they're just buying in bulk. Um, I'm not sure a lot of people like that explanation. Um, and I think this is very reminiscent of the warning that our founding fathers gave us. I mean, if you go back, you realize they didn't even want a full-time military because they were concerned about the potential threat. So even though they allowed for military, Alexander Hamilton explains in the Federalist Papers that every 2 years there's to be a debate as to whether to continue funding. And you see, for doggone sure, there was no authority for federal bureaucrats with guns. Simply no federal police force. You don't see any authority for that in Article 1, Section 8. And in fact, probably one of the first agencies to be armed was the FBI. That didn't happen until close to the mid 1900s. For the first 30 years, even after the FBI was established, you didn't have they weren't carrying guns. They would have to travel with a local law enforcement officer before they would, and the local law enforcement officer would make the arrest. So, there's been just such a huge ramping up and a change in the thinking and the understanding of the Constitution that the founders foresaw this. They didn't want a big, overarching, powerful government with guns. They wanted the American people to be able to keep the government in check, the American people to be able to obey them. And now you see everything being turned on its head with the ramping up, the militarizing of federal police, and then the attempts to disarm the American people. It's a vicious cycle.
What do we do? Where do we go from here? We got Obamacare popping up. The whole world is kind of arising against these banksters. I call them banksters. It's really organized crime. Uh, my friend V.K. Durham, who controls the Durham Trust, which the Bush boys have been trying to hijack and using for quite a few years. I mean, she basically could be one of the world's richest women there with this trust, but they killed her husband, and she just sent me a note. I mean, we're talking about billions of dollars, and I can actually probably go back and give you the names of these of the companies of the bankers. I mean, we got Thornburg executive, SEC Chart 3 executives at the nation's what was formerly the nation's largest mortgage companies for hiding the company's deteriorating financial condition. 28.2 million was what option one mortgage chose to pay to settle the charges. And I mean, we actually have people that went to court, went to trial, and some of them ended up paying more than 1.5 million to settle the charges against them. J.P. Morgan Securities, they agreed to pay 296.9 million to settle the SEC's charges, but they're still operating. They're still in business. So the enforcement I mean, when you're raking off billions of dollars, maybe even trillions of dollars, it doesn't really hurt you to pay $1 million fine now and then, does it?
Yeah, you asked the question. So what can we do?
Yes.
And I think ultimately we need to stay involved. You're doing that by educating people. I think people need to be registered to vote. As registered voters, you can serve on juries. I've served on juries 3 times, and of course that's one of the greatest checks against an overreaching tyrannical government, and that's the whole concept of jury nullification. They can pass bad laws, but if juries will not enforce those laws, then that sends a message back up the chain. And I would say, join Gun Owners of America. Become, that's one of the advantages that we have is that we can direct a loud voice into Washington. Sadly, some people drop out. They say, "Oh, we've lost too much ground." But Clay, I'm a Christian, and my Savior says, "Be salt and light in this world," and that's one thing that we need to do. That's one thing we're trying to do here at Gun Owners of America is preserve things from getting even worse, and we certainly did that earlier this year. I mean, imagine the consequences if they had been able to pass a ban on certain guns and pass a ban on magazine capacity and things like that. That means good people would end up. I mean, that's not all about stopping criminals. That goes after good people, and so good people would go to jail as a result of having a gun that's looks a certain way, or a magazine that is over has a capacity over a certain amount of rounds. And now today we don't have that limitation. People will not go to jail for owning that. If we had lost earlier this year, people would go to jail. So it makes a difference when we get active.
All
And
right. Let me put some heat on you here. And Ayn Rand said the government has no control over honest citizens, no power over honest citizens, so they have to make criminals out of us. And she said that in Atlas Shrugged over 50 years ago. That brings up one of my pet peeves. Now I've said all that has to happen here. Obama signs an executive order, makes some of these guns illegal or whatever, and now you're getting people arrested and going to jail for supporting the Second Amendment. Now I just interviewed, I just got to meet. I believe it was in down here in Corpus Christi. I got to meet the veteran that was thrown down, harassed for carrying a gun on a rural road. Had his rifle over his shoulder, not pointing it at nobody. Had some cops stop him and throw him down. He's suing them. He was speaking at a gun rally here in Corpus, but they're doing that. And I've said if a veteran comes back from Iraq or Vietnam or Afghanistan or Syria, but and they don't have post-traumatic stress syndrome, I would say that means they have no conscience, and they would be good material to recruit into this whole police state, Boston mentality, SWAT team mentality that our law enforcement officers, I mean, it seems like they've abandoned their whole idea of to serve and protect. And we had SWAT teams going into homes and pulling people out of their homes looking for one teenager there in Boston. If a veteran comes back from one of these places and doesn't have a post-traumatic stress syndrome, I'd say then they were really sick. They're SWAT team material, and they don't want veterans with a conscience that know how to use their weapons, that know what the Constitution is, that's read it, and still obey their oath. So this whole thing is trying to demonize. This came out in the Homeland Security report several years ago, that they were trying to demonize the militia. What part of the Second Amendment don't you understand? They tried to demonize the veterans, and they went after the one Christian sect that hasn't been totally polluted by the whole Judeo-Christian mythology, false mythology, according to some of my writers. Uh, this they're demonizing. They're just trying to make more criminals. Now, one of the ways that they have done that in America, and I'd like to get your input because you're of the generation that it really affects, probably even more than me, and that's the drug laws. I mean, how can if a man with a badge can walk up and say, "What's that you got in your pocket? Smells like marijuana to me." Whoa, you're gonna do some time. That they've created 60 million criminals out of for what people had in their pockets. What's your opinion on that? I mean, to me, what we should, since I know in my books and my research, I found that the CIA, the Mossad, were bringing in all the drugs to this country, bringing them in from Colombia, bringing them in from Panama, bringing them in from Vietnam, bringing them in through military bases. And I've known some of the people that were flying the planes. I've known the people that were working for the CIA, Barry Seal. And that's if we abolished all the laws against victimless crimes, stopped the harassment of Americans for what size gun? Whoa, that gun, that's a quarter-inch short, Randy. We're going to have to kill your wife and kids for that. Because somebody should cut that gun off a quarter-inch too much. And they've been doing the same thing to us with the drugs, with the marijuana. They're bringing the cocaine in. They turn around, they give it to the drug dealers in the streets, and they sell it to you, and you go to jail, and you become an IBM employee for 25 cents an hour. Something wrong with that, Eric. How do you see it?
It's certainly reminiscent of what our founders were dealing with, and they wrote in the Declaration of Independence. He's erected a multitude of new officers to harass us and eat out our sustenance. I'm paraphrasing, I don't have it in front of me, but you get the idea. And here we've come full circle with, just the huge militarization of the police, the federal police, the multitude of new offices, the myriad of laws, the great book written a few years ago. I think the author's name was Harvey Silvergate. It's called 3 Felonies a Day, and the point is that the average American unwittingly commits 3 felonies a day, just because there's so many laws on the books, so many that contradict each other, so many that we're unaware of, that we unknowingly commit that many. Part of, I think, really, ultimately what it gets down to is how do we stay involved where we don't just see so much of the problem and say, well, there's nothing I can do, and so I'm just going to pull out. But how do we stay involved and make a difference? One decision that my wife and I made was that we would keep our kids home and teach them at home. So we haven't sent them to the public school where they would give them a very atheistic perspective on
life. Let me just stop you for a second, because I thought of that about 20 years ago, and I helped start the Little Red Schoolhouse, and that grew into Timothy Bible College. This is all an online university, online schools. Your kids can graduate, and with the graduation from the Little Red Schoolhouse, with a diploma from Timothy Bible College, you can get into any college in this country. If you want to go spend your money, to be programmed to think as a communist. I mean, basically, that's what they're educating you on communism. Let me ask you about that too. What happened to the? I mean, did the fight against communism end with Eugene McCarthy, Joe McCarthy? Did it just end? Did the communists triumph here? Or is the whole thing the communists in Russia were financed by New York banker Jacob Schiff? Marx and Lenin were financed. They were given gold and sent on a special train over there to organize the assassination of the Tsar. Russian people had never been our enemy, and they aren't now, but they're trying to move us to a war, and I want to get your opinion on Syria. They're trying to move us into a war in Syria, and I don't think Syria has done any more to threaten the United States than Libya, Egypt, or Iraq, or Afghanistan for that matter.
Yeah, it is simply stunning that we would be considering involvement in Syria. The hypocrisy where here we have a Muslim Brotherhood connection. So that's okay. And you can bet that when they receive those machine guns, those automatic weapons, they're not going to be going through background checks. No. But here in our country, of course, he does support, even expanding background checks. He supports bans of certain firearms, many firearms misnamed as assault weapons when they're not really. They're semi-automatic firearms. But even then, he wants to ban those for civilian use. But again, it's okay for civilians in Syria to have, which I think is a tacit admission, by the way, even from our president. And obviously, he didn't intend this message to be sent, but he's sending it quite strongly. And that is, you know what? Isn't that the reason why we want guns? Is because there will be situations where the government will turn on you when a tyrannical government will be harming you, and that's when you need guns to protect yourself. Guns in the hands of civilians. And how interesting that he's assented to that notion by having the CIA funnel guns to the Syrian rebels, but to his dying breath, he would try to keep you and me from owning these types of firearms.
What? All right. The computers are giving me a hard time here. My apologies. The Eric, gun owners has done a masterful job of this, at least educating the American people and organizing. I mean, that's one of the problems we have here is organizing. Maybe it's the whole independent American spirit. Maybe it's the rebel in us. We just don't work well. I don't take orders well. But I think we're really getting down to the point of survival. Now, I came up with a plan many years ago called the Liberty Village concept, and that was taking a family farm. Now, the basis of every civilization is a self-sufficient family farm, but plank number 9 on the Communist Manifesto calls a government control of agriculture and corporate farms. Our corporate farms, like Monsanto, are destroying, and the commercial farms that they're feeding are really destroying our health, destroying our ability to grow our own food. So I figured if we could generate our own electricity from wind or solar, and we did that across this country. We had windmills at every ranch, on every farm, pumping water. So we were doing all right. We settled this whole country like that. Why couldn't we get back to that? Now, I tried to do that in New Mexico, but nobody could leave their town because they had jobs there. So I suggested, well, why not just bring the country back to the city? It's really just a matter of relearning what the civilization has been about for the last 10,000 years. Growing your own food, generating your own power, and why can't we do that in our neighborhoods? Oh, neighborhood association won't let you have a windmill. Oh, they don't like those solar panels on your roof are ugly. We can't. That destroy the neighborhood. This is all ways that the corporate America continue to, and of course that you go back 70, 80 years to prohibition. Prohibition wasn't to stop you from drinking alcohol. It was to increase the price of the alcohol, and to make it more difficult to run those Model Ts on alcohol, you had to go to Standard Oil to get the gasoline on the corner. Why can't we take a little step backwards with the technology we got? You can have the school, here's school and college at your fingertips right now. Where you're listening to me on the computer, you could be talking to Dr. Jake Wade at Timothy Bible College. All that's linked on the Free American. And if you got with your neighbors and said, hey, let's do a neighborhood watch thing. You know, let's work together. Let's grow food, not grass. And let's tell the neighborhood association to take a hike and put windmills and solar on our roofs. This may not be an immediate answer, but if the more we can take their income away from them, if you can shop in your backyard for vegetables rather than go to HEB to get it, or Safeway to get it, and you can generate sun from sun and the wind, you can generate enough power to light up your house at night or keep your computer going. Why couldn't we do that? Why could we? Is that a step backwards? Is that something nobody talks about? I mean, and in the news, the people are doing that in isolated pockets. There's a family in Pasadena, California, that's growing 6,000 pounds out of 1/10 of an acre in their backyard. Why can't we do this?
Well, and certainly to add to that, in terms of providing for your own defensive needs, and sometimes that will involve the neighborhood. You know, you mentioned a neighborhood watch. Sometimes it's got to become more than that. In the 60s, it was the Deacons for Defense that helped organize neighborhoods so that they could protect themselves against the Klan. In fact, Ambassador Rice talks about how her daddy, back in that time period, would patrol with other men in the neighborhood at night to protect the neighborhood. And then in the 90s, we saw again this rise, even in L.A., during the riots, where neighborhoods were banding together to organize for defense because looters were going wild, and there was no police presence at all. And once again, you saw that in the 2000s with the shortly after Hurricane Katrina. Whatever police presence you did see, or military presence, they were taking guns. But people that were able to hang on to their guns were banding together to protect themselves against looters and other roving gangs. And if you remember, the police had actually fled ahead of the storm, and so what was left was just total disorder, and lots of theft, lots of assaults during that time period. So there are these times, especially these breakdown of law and order type of times where we do need to be not only ready for our own defense, but also having had communicated with our neighbors for such an eventuality as that.
You know, I went through Hurricane Andrew. Matter of fact, God spared me. He turned the storm a little bit to the left. It was headed right down County Line Road in Miami. And he pointed it down to Homestead. Well, took out Homestead. And I went down there. And I can tell you right now that FEMA was good for one thing and one thing only. We organized a run, the bikers organized a run down to Homestead, and the Miami motormen escorted us. It was a kick. I told them, I'm going to be taking pictures, guys, so I'll be passing you now and then. And I did that, and we got down to Homestead. We couldn't have found it without them. I mean, there were no street signs. Hell, there were no streets. There were no buildings on down in Homestead. But there was one place that survived, and that was the local biker bar. And all of the residents of that neighborhood were camped out on the parking lot of the biker bar, and we came down there. I got off and went up to the motormen and shook their hands, and I told them, guys, I want to thank you. You made a lifelong dream of mine come true. Thank you very much. I thanked each one of them. And they said, what's that, Clay? What? I said, I always wanted to blow by a bunch of cops at 100 miles an hour and not get a ticket. But FEMA was good for one thing. They came and picked up the bodies of the looters that we hung from the telephone poles. That was it. The National Guard brought us a generator, so the bikers and the neighbors and the National Guard had cold beer at the biker bar down in Homestead. And I did a film shortly, 10 years ago, about the true face of FEMA. I filmed a Homeland Security meeting, and Colonel John Brinkerhoff was lecturing law enforcement in Albuquerque, telling me, in case of a single outbreak of smallpox, in case of a natural disaster of significant magnitude, like an earthquake along the New Madrid fault line, or a nuclear attack, we'll need 400,000 well-armed, well-trained, organized, disciplined troops to control the American people, because some of them just won't follow orders. And that really outraged me. I did a film called True Face of FEMA about that. Because when 9/11 happened, when the World Trade Center went down, I didn't see anybody looting. I saw firefighters, I saw civilians helping civilians. Helping people that had been injured. Nobody was fighting. We didn't need troops to guard us. And I don't think we needed the troops in New Orleans. We didn't need troops in Homestead. We brought all the blankets down. We brought the food down. We took care of our neighbors. Now that's the spirit of America to me. That's your barn burned. Hey, we'll be over there Saturday and build you a new one. That's the America that I love. That's the one I took an oath to defend. I think I'm right. I think that's the way to work. And this whole Homeland Security is nothing more than the Gestapo on steroids. And now with the NSA tapping all of our phones, even the average brain dead, spoon-fed program television watching Americans are starting to realize something's wrong here. Why are they tapping your phones? I wonder how many of our legislators, how many of our senators, how many of our congressmen are being blackmailed by this whole, and by the way, they farmed this out to Israel in 2004. When George Bush told you that the NSA was allowed to tap everybody's phones, it was two Israeli companies, Amdocs and Converse, that were doing the tapping. And we've heard the same thing about the NSA, what they're doing, because it's unconstitutional for them to tap our phones. They're letting a foreign country do it. Am I accurate on that? Is that what's happening?
It is no doubt that our government has gotten too big, and the people need to rein it in. The NSA tapping, the IRS targeting of conservative groups. Even in Obamacare, we have the greatest collection of data at any other time, compared to any other time, will be through that Obamacare law. And in fact, there's now even some liberal Democrats that are speaking out about this, about the concern that Obamacare is now going to give rise to all kinds of hackers and things, people like that. Well, never mind the hackers. Yeah, that's bad too. But it's also going to allow all kinds of government agencies to get to that information as well, and that's also just as concerning as we were talking about earlier, because now you're going to have FBI using it to deny gun purchases. Certainly, some will say, "Oh, it was never intended for that," but see, that's the problem. You give a sinful heart too much power, you end up with unintended consequences, and that's really what we are reaping right now. We have as a people looked to government as God, the little G, to solve all our problems, fix all our problems, and then now we're experiencing the bitter fruit of that. And it's really the only thing that can turn that around is the people reining it in. But the people have to have a heart change themselves. And to the extent that they keep desiring the delicacies and and all the benefits, then they're not going to be clamoring for shrinking the size of government, voting for better politicians. I mean, how sad that a man like Barack Obama could win a second term. It's just simply disgusting, and I think that just shows where the hearts of the American people
But
are.
what choice did we have? Oh, yeah. Mitt Romney, who employs the Mossad and controls Clear Channel, or Songbird McCain, you know, the one that made all the propaganda films for the Viet Cong, got pardoned for that. I mean, what choice did we have? And I've been
Well,
through this. I've been through this. I've been through a presidential campaign. You can ask your dad about Charles Collins. Charles was running for president in 1996. And I went from Maine to California to Oakland with Charles. And anytime he got up before the Republican parties, the caucuses, to tell them we could buy back the Federal Reserve, wipe out a $6 trillion debt, which is now doubled, every cameraman on stage turned the cameras off and pointed them at the ground. Pointed them at the ground. In two states, Maine and Wisconsin, Michigan, they unplugged his microphone while he was talking. But so how do we vote? How do we vote? How's the vote going to do anything here when the mainstream media will only tell us about the people the Federal Reserve wants in power?
well,
Somebody in the chat room just mentioned that the electronic voting machines elected Obama.
yeah, and that's where you get to the point where you either say, I'm just going to drop out completely, which I would not advise, or I say, look, you just in whatever sphere of influence you have, you work for change there. That's why my wife and I don't send our kids to public schools. We homeschool them. That's why we've made, why I'm here at Gun Owners of America, and why we're being salt and light in the areas that we can. I think sadly what happens, I mean, why do we end up with only two sour choices? I mean, there was a lot of earlier choices that eventually led to us having McCain as a choice and Romney as a choice, when really they're not a choice, you know. So there's a lot of work to be done, absolutely. But unless we just throw up our hands and say, well, then I'll do nothing, then we're like the parable of the talents, the person who just buried his talent in the ground. And that's no good either. So, it's just a matter of we got to get busy and do what we're called to do in the area of influence that we have.
Well, I'm encouraging people to talk to everybody on your block. Put out a little flyer. I'll make the flyer for you. Tell them we're going to do an experiment on this block. We're going to try to become self-sufficient, more self-sufficient here. We'll tell you where you can get a solar generator. We can tell you where you can get solar panels. We'll tell you where you can get seeds that are genetically modified. Do something. What can you make in your garage? Can you make a solar panel in your garage? Can you make a wind generator in your garage? Hell, Orville and Wilbur built an airplane in theirs. You know, Willie G. Davidson built a Harley Davidson in their garage. What can you do in your garage? We've really been, I think we've been sidetracked, programmed, propagandized to be dependent on the oil companies, on the football companies, on the pharmaceutical companies, every other. My guest yesterday said, you know, what we ought to do is quit going to the damn football games. How much money we spend to go see a football game to be programmed on the television for the latest in their pharmaceutical. Hey, having trouble getting it up, guys? We got Viagra here. It's only a 2,000% markup, but you'll be happy. I mean, this is again, I tell people they don't call television programming for nothing. They want you to think about Miami Vice and you know, not the home gardening channel. If I am trying to get this information out, this radio show and all that, you can. I would appreciate any you letting people know on your mailing list here about this show. I've had you and your father on here many times over the last 20 years. I'll have you back because I approve of what you're doing. I mean, what part, again, it's when they called me up to ask me what I thought about the Homeland Security report, assessment, and I said, what part of the Second Amendment don't you folks at ABC understand? You know, the militia by law, now correct me if I'm wrong here, the militia is every able-bodied American male between the ages of 18 and 45. And that means the governor can call you up and say, hey, guys, we got a little, we need, the sheriff needs a little posse. You know, why can't, and I recommend if you're going to start a militia, do it in the sheriff's office. I did it in the governor's office. Gary Johnson, by the way, Gary Johnson was the best choice, in my opinion, for president, and he ran under the Libertarian Party, and you never even saw him on any of the debates. You never saw him anywhere. This is, you know, he's got as much credentials as Mitt Romney, and more than John McCain. So it's really a matter of education. Now, I'm not promoting Romney, and I'm not promoting McCain, and I'm certainly not promoting Obama, but I'd be happy to promote Gary Johnson. I'd be happy to do. We really got to get back to the local. We can't make a change. If it's hard to go over to make a change at the World Bank over in Brussels, hard to get the tickets over there or get through Homeland Security without pulling my boots off. But if we make change in our own neighborhood, if we make change in our own county, if we start going to these county meetings and we can shake off some of the programming by listening to people like Eric Pratt on the Free American Hour, by reading an ad for Gun Owners of America in the next issue of the Free American Magazine. Now, they stopped me from putting the Free American Magazine out for 10 years. After the accident, I couldn't get advertising. I couldn't raise the money to pay for the paper. And that would have probably gone to Hearst's timber operations anyway. But I started it back online. I got 2 issues out now, and every issue from now on will have one of these radio shows linked to it, and it'll have links to Gun Owners of America.
Well, Clay, I want to thank you for that, and certainly thank you for having me on. And just encourage people to to do what they can, and at our website at gunowners.org, they can also sign up for free email alerts, and that's where we do a lot of our work, is getting people to be active in contacting their legislators, and we make it easy for them, giving them even the pre-written language. But that's the kind of thing we need to do I love the statement from the late Senator Everett Dirksen: when I feel the heat, I see the light. And that's what GOA is in the business of doing, is putting the heat on these legislators, so that even if they don't want to do the right thing, we get enough people screaming at them that they will.
Well, if you will send out an email alert that the Free American is back in business, and that this radio show will feature gun owners, somebody from gun owners, I'd like to, we talk about it every week. I mean, I've had other people that work for gun owners that have been on my show, and I will continue that. We really have to stick together, or we will hang alone. And I appreciate what you've done. I appreciate you staying with me as long as you have. Your dad usually can only handle about 30 minutes, so nice to get the younger generation in. And this show will be up on my website under your name as an MP3. You can save it for your default player from Blog Talk, and you can send that out to everybody and let people know. Contrary to popular rumor, Clay Douglas is not dead, and neither is the Free American. We're back, and we're going to be going strong. You can read it. You can read this issue. We got 2 issues out now, $2.99. They used to pay $5 in a Barnes & Noble for the Free American magazine. Now you got it for $2.99. And love to have you back on next month.
All right, well, thank you, sir.
Thank you, Eric Pratt, Gun Owners of America, and the links right up on my website. God bless you.
God bless. Take care. Bye-bye.
All right. All right. Here, I'm glad the audio is superb. The my other computer keeps crashing here. Well, let me give you some more update here. First of all, let me save this.